You're now watching the mystical green beanie. Green beanie.
Hey, what's going on, dudes and dudettes? I am the mystical green beanie, and I wanted to give you guys my quick thoughts on the Avengers game. It's crazy. I feel like, generally speaking, there are two camps of people. There are the people who think that this looks like a mobile game, for whatever reason. Like, for real? What kind of phones y'all got? Them bitches run Steam or something? Mobile game, what the fuck, dog? But then there's the crowd of people who are just apologizing as hard as they possibly can for this game. And I don't want to say it's embarrassing, because, in all honesty, we all have something that we enjoy. I'm not going to call someone a shill because Marvel's Avengers actually looks like fun to them. Who am I to say whether or not you should or shouldn't enjoy something? Unless you're a Klansman and you're lynching black people, well then yeah, you definitely should stop doing that. That said, as far as my reaction goes, meh. The game looks far from terrible, but nowhere near the level of quality where I'm compelled to buy this day one at full price. That said, I wanted to focus less on the gameplay and the graphics and more the story and presentation. So, coming from the perspective of a comic book reader, this game was very clearly being worked on for quite a while. And, okay, let's address the elephant in the room. The Inhumans. The Inhumans play a major role in this game's story, and I think it's safe to say that nobody gives two squirts of piss about the Inhumans. Unless you work for Marvel Corporate. Now, why is this important? Well, you see, when Marvel Entertainment developed their own movie studio back in 2006, they began building a franchise which is now known as the Marvel Cinematic Universe. However, if you noticed, while Marvel Studios had a wealth of characters to pull from to tell stories with, there were a few characters who were noticeably absent, like Spider-Man, and the Fantastic Four, and Ghost Rider, and the X-Men. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're probably thinking, why does this dude's voice sound like a 9-year-old with fetal alcohol syndrome who's being circumcised with a soldering iron? Sorry, that's just my voice, that's how I sound. But you're also probably thinking, what in the 5 flavors of hickory dickory duck does Marvel's movies have to do with their games? Well, kinda, sorta, everything? So, this is a problem that goes all the way back to the 90s when Marvel Comics filed for bankruptcy. So in order to pull themselves out of the financial toilet, they started selling all of their IPs to major movie studios like Sony, Universal, New Line Cinema, and Fox Studios. And it worked. I'd say we got some pretty good movies out of the deal, and it helped get Marvel back on their feet. And then Marvel Entertainment decided to make their own movie studio and build a shared movie universe from the ground up with their own versions of their characters. Or, much rather, the characters they didn't sell off. Flash forward a couple of years, Marvel has now turned a bunch of C and D-list characters into pop culture icons. And now, Marvel Studios is looking at all of the movie studios that they sold their character licenses to back in the 90s, and they're asking for those characters back. And as you would expect, the response from said movie studios roughly translated to,
come on, hell no, to the no, 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 hell to the no.
To which Marvel responded by canceling or severely downplaying all of the characters that they didn't have the film rights to, and pretty much every other medium, with some exceptions. And the reasoning behind this was that they didn't want to promote with their comics or video games or animated shows any of the characters that they couldn't make movies out of, because that would be them advertising characters that they couldn't make money off of, I think is what they were thinking. But the point is, they stopped publishing comics with characters that they didn't own the film rights to. Same with video games and TV shows. And one of those IPs was the X-Men. And pretty much all of the mutants, because those characters were owned by Fox Studios for the longest time. So without any mutants to make comics with, for soulless corporate reasons, Marvel decided to replace them with the next best thing. So Marvel tried to replace the mutants with the Inhumans, and everyone hated that. Comic book readers hated it, comic book creators hated it, but Marvel was very adamant in their bold new direction with the Inhumans, and their stance was either learn to love it or get fucked. And this is where we run into problem number one with this new Avengers game. It's very clear that this game was being developed in the years before Marvel's parent company, Disney, cannibalized Fox Studios, giving Marvel the license to make X-Men movies, but more importantly, allow the X-Men to be readable again. Because the game was announced during Marvel's big Inhumans push. So, yeah. It's also especially glaring when you notice that the story is all about how the superhumans start popping up and everyone hates and fears them. So then this government-sanctioned corporation starts building robots to kill, round up, and experiment on said superhumans, and the heroes of the story have to work with a bunch of freedom fighters to rescue these superhumans from concentration camps. This is the X-Men, right? I can't be the only person who sees that. Like, come on. But no, it's the Avengers, just like you know them from the movies. And, okay, let's talk about that. Something else I failed to mention is that for a while now, really, the past 7 or 8 years, Marvel has been obsessed with synergy. Everything has to look like the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Everything. And when it comes to merchandise, that's one thing, because you gotta sell backpacks and action figures and sippy cups to little kids who watch these movies, and I get it. You know, look, whether you like it or not, superheroes are for children. And these corporations are in the business of selling products to children. And the best way to do that in this case is to sell an image that's recognizable to them. And of course, that's going to be the MCU versions of these Marvel characters. But then they started synergizing the cartoons with the MCU by canceling pretty much all of their shows and launching new shows that were basically generic brand versions of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And then the comics started doing it. In fact, I'd argue for some characters the comics are still trying to do it. And I say all this to say that the number one complaint that I've been hearing from people regarding Marvel's Avengers is that, oh my god, why don't they look like the Avengers from the movies? Oh my god, the character models make them look like stunt doubles for the movies. Oh my god, that's not Robert Downey Jr., that's Bobbert Frowny Fumer. And the reason they say that is because I feel as though the developers of this game have made the exact same mistake as the creators behind Marvel's most recent animated shows and their comics. Just for comparison's sake, let's take a look at Rocksteady's Batman Arkham franchise. The first game came out in 2009, and by all means, Rocksteady could have traded off of the aesthetic of Christopher Nolan's Batman Begins and The Dark Knight. But instead, they chose to go the smarter route. Instead of looking at any specific TV show or film franchise, they used the comics as a frame of reference and designed a world around a narrative that was unique to their vision, but was distinctly Batman. Not Christopher Nolan's Batman, not Tim Burton's Batman, not Joel Schumacher's Batman, not even the animated series Batman. It was just Batman. That's why people don't look at Rocksteady's Catwoman and think, she's kind of like a discount version of Michelle Pfeiffer. No, she's just Catwoman. Same with Robin, and Nightwing, and Gordon, and the Joker, and everyone else in those games. And the same can be said for Insomniac's Spider-Man. The developers behind that game didn't use any of the 3 film franchises that have been established over the past 2 decades as the core frame of reference. They looked at the comics, and then proceeded to build a universe that is unique to their vision with the traditional versions of those characters in mind, and using them as the foundation to more or less do their own thing. And that's why nobody looks at Spider-Man PS4 and thinks to themselves, ew, he's just a poor man's attempt at Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker. No, he's just Peter Parker. Insomniac's Spider-Man doesn't feel like it's a shallow version of any one specific source in pop culture. It feels like they're doing their riff on the comics and making the familiar fresh and unfamiliar. And that's where I think this Avengers game fails, because so much of this game's aesthetic feels like it's just the MCU, but different. And that's very off-putting for people, because the vast majority of people who love Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man love that version of the character because it's a unique twist on the comics. Jon Favreau and Robert Downey Jr. took the familiar and made it fresh and unfamiliar, but more importantly, it's an original take. Same with Thor and Hulk and Black Widow and Nick Fury. The Marvel Cinematic Universe works in the same way that Insomniac's Spider-Man just works. And in the same way that Rocksteady's Batman just works. They use the comics, the ground zero versions of these characters and mythologies, as the foundation. And then they built on it. But this game doesn't do that. Instead, it uses the Marvel Cinematic Universe as its foundation and then tries to build on the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And the reason why that doesn't work is because it's like, imagine a painting. Now imagine someone using that painting as a frame of reference and recreating it within their own art style, making it something that's very recognizable, but also fundamentally different. You know, it's an adaptation. Now imagine someone else comes along and they try to trace over the adaptation of the original painting with crayon, because herp-a-derp, people liked this one, so let me just copy it. That is soulless. It's devoid of creativity, and it just feels weird and wrong. The Tony Stark presented in Marvel's Avengers doesn't feel like an interesting, fresh take on Tony Stark, nor does it feel like the comics. It feels like discount Robert Downey Jr. Bruce Banner doesn't feel like Bruce Banner. He feels like a poor man's Mark Ruffalo. Same with Black Widow, and Captain America, and Nick Fury, and Jarvis. Jesus, gone are the days where Jarvis is a flesh and blood butler. He's just gonna be Scarlett Johansson's voice from her from now on. And I honestly feel like people wouldn't compare this game to the Marvel Cinematic Universe so hard if the developers used the comics as a frame of reference instead of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that the developers should completely omit the contributions made to these characters and how Marvel Studios has affected the legacy of the Marvel landscape. All I'm saying is that the aesthetic of this game feels too close to the MCU to feel like it's its own thing. For example, of all of the ways to visually realize the Iron Man armor, did they really have to design it in the aesthetic of the MCU? Hell, Tony Stark's entire personality and dialogue feels like somebody's dad trying to impersonate Robert Downey Jr. at a birthday party. And in all honesty, it's a little painful. Furthermore, the Avengers have been around for decades. There's like 30 different roster lineups that they could have gone with. Granted, maybe only 10 or 15 of them are actually good, but did they have to go with the movie roster for the core team? Like, right off the bat? I think a better lineup for this game's core roster could have been Captain America, Iron Man, Thor, Hawkeye, and the Wasp. Or hell, maybe you can just omit Captain America completely and sub in, I don't know, Yellow Jacket? Spider-Woman? You know, just something that people maybe aren't used to seeing as the core lineup from the films. Hell, even just giving them character designs that aren't so padded and layered and busy like the MCU costumes are really could have helped. Like, instead of putting Captain America in a padded armored suit with muted colors, maybe this was the place to put him in something more akin to his traditional comic book outfit. I mean, it worked for both Spider-Man and Batman, so why not here? Also, instead of having Hulk just scream and grunt, why not have him talk? Like, literally every version of the character outside of the MCU. And, for fuck's sake, Avengers Tower literally looks like the one from the first two Avengers movies. Let alone the fact that they operate out of a tower at all. And, I mean, I get it. The Avengers have operated out of a tower for the past 15 to 16 years now, both in the comics as well as the movies, as well as, I think, multiple video game titles. But again, if the game devs wanted to distance themselves from the movies, all they had to do was put them in Avengers Mansion. Case closed. Either that or have them operate out of the Triskelion and say that Tony Stark bought the building from S.H.I.E.L.D. Anything. But they didn't. At last year's E3, the game developers alongside the crew from Marvel Games told everyone that they were trying to be different from the movies. In the end, they didn't go far enough in trying to distance themselves from the MCU, and now people are looking at the game's presentation and thinking to themselves, ew, this looks like a bootleg MCU movie. And I hate to say it, but that's because it is. Anyways, yeah, I hate making videos like this because I feel like they're just major downers. But I always want to be completely honest with you guys and how I feel. And part of being honest is just being a little negative sometimes and letting people know when you don't think something's working. And ultimately, I think that the problem with Marvel's Avengers is synergy. In fact, I think this could wind up being the straw that breaks the camel's back for a lot of Marvel fans, because this is a problem that people have been complaining about, not just for their games, but for everything for years. Again, it started with the cartoons, then it bled into the comics, which I personally think is far worse because characters will be reworked to be more in line with their Marvel Cinematic Universe counterparts, even if it completely goes against the characterization for the 20, 30, 40 years they've been around before their introduction in the MCU. So yeah, I hope that the less than glowing reception of how the game looks is a step in the right direction for Marvel, so that they can, cut it out with all the synergy. Anyways, those are my thoughts on the matter, but what about you? What do you think? Let me know down below in the comment section. Also, if you liked the video, hit the like button, share, support the channel, and if you want to see more content like this, all you have to do is subscribe. I'm the Mystical Green Beanie, thanks for watching, and as always, until next time, adios nachos, adios.